been 30 plus years, but vinyl records are once again the predominant physical format. It's an industry that has gone through an entire rebirth and evolution over the last few years. I'm going to talk to you about everything that's right and wrong in the vinyl industry on this episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, a small chain of independent record shops in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you're not local, but you are in the U.S., you can shop online with us anytime at ntxvinyl.com, and would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel here on YouTube. Follow us across social media at NTX Vinyl is the handle on Facebook and Instagram. Let's talk about everything that is right and wrong with the vinyl industry right now in 2024. I'm going to try and hit some of the high spots. I'm going to try and hit some of the low spots. And this is a difficult one because I got a lot of skin in the game as a record store owner, right? But I'll be honest with you, I was a collector long before I started NTX Vinyl, and I'm still a collector outside of NTX Vinyl. So I really do see this from all perspectives, which I think is something that is very, very important when you're looking at an industry that's going through so much change. So let's talk about some of the things that are going really, really well right now. What's right about the vinyl industry? The first thing I want to call out has to do with some of the people who are doing really great work at labels. The boutique labels like Analog Productions, like Vinyl Me Please, Craft, Mobile Fidelity, these in a lot of cases reissue labels, but in some cases putting out new releases as well. The quality on some of those titles, on a lot of those titles, really, really shines. You can look at some of the releases from these labels over the last couple of years, and I can tell you I've got a bunch of them in my collection, and some of them are the best sounding records in my collection. There's some of the best artwork, the best packaging, and that's because people care. So I think one of the things that's going really right in the industry is these boutique labels and their artisan approach to pressing records and manufacturing, and I applaud every single person who is involved in all of those companies. Those are just a sample, but there's a lot of companies out there, a lot of small labels, reissue labels, and that has to do with the entire manufacturing chain from the mastering to the manufacturing to the pressing, all of those types of things. So there's a lot going right in regards to those boutique labels, and I really appreciate their work. One of the things that plays into is the fact that, hey, what's going right in 2024? Well, there's a lot more record stores. If you go back 5, 10, 15 years, it was much harder to find a record store, even in a major market. So you've got more record stores, you've got more pressing plants. I think the last number I heard was around 60 or 70 pressing plants in the US alone. So you've got, tons of great record stores. You've got pressing plants popping up everywhere, and that's all great for the industry, and especially as it relates to those boutique labels and their ability to get product into customers' hands. And so that's a really big thing now, is that whole chain of kind of manufacturing and distribution is all set up and really, really firing nicely now in regards to getting product into people's hands, and that's very, very important for the industry. Another thing that I think is going really right is the community involved in records. I would put this channel as a part of that community, which I'm grateful for. I would also put my Facebook group, Now Spinning, as a part of that community. And there's a lot of great people involved. There's a lot of people who are collecting records and experiencing records for the right reasons. Is there a wrong way to listen to a record or a wrong way to collect records? Well, you be the judge of that. I'm just saying, from my perspective, I see a lot of people in the community who are in this for what I consider to be the right reasons, which is the value of the music, not the monetary value, but the value of the music and what it means to them personally. And that's why they're choosing to spend money on it. And that's why they're choosing to take up space in their house with it, as opposed to just pushing play on a phone, So that community has really fueled that growth, and it's fueled the number of record stores, which has fueled the number of pressing plants. It's all very connected, and I think the community is a big driver of a lot of that. Speaking of reissues in those boutique labels and even major labels, one of the things that's great right now is a lot of albums that have been typically really hard to find or impossible to find because they didn't exist on vinyl, they're getting reissued because of all this demand, because of the growth, because of the community, because of the infrastructure of the stores and the distributors and the labels. Now these albums are coming back and you're getting to actually add them to your collection. I've added tons of albums to my collection that I would have never owned previously because the originals that came out in the, let's say, the early 90s were just crazy expensive and rare, and so I was never going to spend $300, $400, $500 on a record. But now it's getting reissued and you can get it for 25, 30, 35 bucks, you know. That's an amazing thing. And again, that all speaks to the fact that there is infrastructure in place with the demand and the supply of the buyers in the stores and all that. So I love seeing hard to find albums get quality reissues. That's a really good thing that we're seeing on a pretty regular basis right now. That's all about new vinyl. Let's talk about pre-owned vinyl. One of the things that I think is going right in 2024 versus maybe 2021 through 2023 is that pre-owned vinyl, from my perspective, in my opinion, is starting to come back to reality. And what I mean by that is from a pricing perspective. You know, there was a time there for 18 to 24 months, which was the COVID bubble of this thing where every record seemed rare. You got so many people coming into the hobby with fresh eyes, and they were just overwhelmed and wanting to collect everything at once. And it really made an impact on price, right? Even on pre-owned records. So records that used to be kind of, you know, dollar bin records you could find for $1 or $2, those were going for $5 or $7. Records that used to be $5, $7 records, they were going for 10 or 15. And then you had your kind of top tier artists like whatever, a Led Zeppelin or a Black Sabbath or a Queen. Those records used to be really easy to find for, you know, 10, 15, 20 bucks. And those were selling for $30, $40. Well, all of that has calmed back down. At least from my perspective, from the stores that I see, from the way I price, from what I look at online, which I look at a lot of records online, used and new. And again, from my perspective, everything's starting to kind of level back down a little bit. It's maybe not all the way back down to where it was pre-COVID, but I think the point is it's a lot easier to find quality pre-owned records now at a reasonable price. I feel like it got a little unreasonable based on the quantity that is available of some of these records a couple of years ago. So that's all kind of come back to a reasonable level, and I think that's a really, really good thing. Let's talk about Record Store Day. This is on my right list, and I think it's on my wrong list too. But look, there's a lot of strong opinions on Record Store Day. I think, and I've said this before, for people who are new to this hobby, when I say new, maybe they started collecting last week, maybe they started collecting a couple of years ago, that's still new because they're still developing, they're still learning, they're still gaining knowledge, they're still building their collection. For those types of people, having a dedicated event once or twice a year that drives them to their local record store, like that's an amazing thing. It creates energy, it creates activity, it creates interest. In a lot of cases, it creates news, and all of that is great for the industry. And in most cases, it's great for the buyers. Now, if you've been doing Record Store Day for 20 years and you're burnt out on it, and you're like, they don't have any new releases I care about anymore, and there's no way I'm waiting in any line for them, like that's totally cool. I get it. I'm talking about growth for this industry, and RSD is an important piece of that because it brings a lot of attention. And for new collectors, I think it's just a really cool thing. I know if I think back to when I started really collecting records when I was 15, if there would have been an event, a day where I could go and there'd be a huge crowd of people and a lot of energy and all these new exclusive releases, like them or not, it would have still driven me to the store, and I would have thought it would have been a really cool thing. And I guarantee you that's what a lot of new collectors feel today. Last on my list in regards to what's going right, I think there's some things going right in regards to creativity. If you think back a long time ago, there used to be really creative packaging and releases and all those types of things in regards to what the artist and label put into it as opposed to just a standard LP and a jacket. And I think there's a lot of that going on right now. There's a fine line to walk there, but I think having the ability to produce colored records with different effects, having the ability, larger artists who have the ability to create unique packaging, things like that. I love seeing that. I love seeing the anniversary reissues, like them or not. There's a lot of effort and time going into those. And for someone like me who's very nostalgic about releases that came out 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, having extras, whether it be information, whether it be music, whether it be just artifacts and memorabilia, like all that stuff's really cool. So I'm glad that labels are now really doubling down on that stuff. And I think there's a lot right happening in that area of the industry. Let's talk about what's wrong with the vinyl industry right now. Well, the elephant in the room. New records are more expensive than ever. It's very frustrating for me as a store owner. It's very frustrating for me as a collector that most new records these days, if it's a single LP, is 25, 30 bucks in most cases. If it's a double LP, 30, 40, 45 bucks. That's a lot of money. Why? Why are the prices so high? I don't know. If you talk to pressing plants, which I have, they will tell you their prices have not gone up. I work with a lot of different pressing plants and I can confirm that. May have increased a little bit, but by and large, especially post-COVID, things are back to kind of where they were pre-COVID in regards to the cost of pressing a record. So why does the cost keep going up when you want to go buy a record on the retail side? Well, you'd have to ask the record labels. They're the ones that price this thing. They're the ones that put the MSRP on it. All I know is from a record store owner's perspective, if I'm selling a record for, let's say, $45, a brand new album that just came out, whether it's a reissue or a net new album, $45, man, I'm paying $35, $37, $38. Do the math on that. There's $6 or $7 or $8 in there, maybe $10 if I'm lucky. That doesn't take into consideration all of my overhead, right? So don't blame your record store. The new vinyl prices are not set by the record stores in most cases. They are MSRP, they're set industry-wide, and for the most part, people follow those, and that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the record labels just really pinch every single bit of profit they can away from the consumers. That's what's happening, and that's the biggest thing that's going wrong with the industry right now, unless you consider the fact that number 2 on my list is quality control. I legit do not understand. I don't understand why so many records are warped. I don't get it. I open a lot of new records, I buy a lot of new records, I sell a lot of new records, I have to deal with records. Now, it's not like 7 out of 10 records are warped, no. But it's like, 1 out of 20 or something. Depending on the pressing, it could be 5 out of 20. Are pressing plants moving too fast? Are they not letting them cool long enough? There's lots of theories in regards to why this happened, but it just comes down to quality control. Most of it, the issues that I see have to do with warp. They just come out and they're not flat, and so I don't know why that is. There's also other issues with them being dirty, with them, just the mastering not being good. There's other issues in regards to quality control, sound-wise, in addition to the warping. But pair the high vinyl prices with the less than ideal quality control, and that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of collectors and a lot of record store owners, and that's one of the things that I think has got to be fixed moving forward. A lot of that, I think, is growing pains. Again, you've got an entire industry learning how to do this again. People who own pressing plants, believe me, they didn't know how to run a pressing plant. They just dove in and figured it out, because that knowledge and that equipment and those rule books, manuals, those are all gone from back in the day in the 60s, 70s, 80s, when pressing plants were everywhere and vinyl was being pressed in much larger numbers. Now it's a more artisan thing. It's a more craft-like thing, much smaller quantities in the hundreds or thousands versus the, tens of thousands or millions like it used to be. And so I think hopefully over time, the price will maybe level out. We'll see. And the quality control will increase. That would be a great thing for this hobby. One of the things I mentioned that I thought was going right was creativity. I'll also say what I think is going wrong is kind of when that creativity falls off the cliff and it becomes gimmicky. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of an artist having 40 different colors of a new release. Like, hey, have your indie exclusive color. You know, maybe your big boxes, they get an exclusive one. You sell one direct from your website. Like, you can add those up pretty quick and you got 2, 3, 4 colors, right? I don't care who the band is. I don't care if it's the Rolling Stones or Pearl Jam or the Red Hot Chili Peppers or Taylor Swift or Billie Eilish. It doesn't really matter. I just think it can jump the shark a little bit and become a little too gimmicky, because then you've got people collecting for, in my opinion, the wrong reasons. You can collect however you want. I'm not here to tell anyone how they can collect, but from my perspective, if you're going to stick with this vinyl thing for the long term, you need to be in it for the music. And if you're not even opening your records because you're just collecting them like they're baseball cards because they're different colors, it feels a little gimmicky, and I feel like the labels are doubling down on that gimmick, and that gets a little tough. You know, the same can be said with like marketing terms like limited edition and colorway and like all these kind of like buzzwordy type things, which I think in a lot of scenarios are put there to oversell the record. Like, I would kind of rather go back to an idea of the music being the thing that really should sell it, and everything else should be a little bit extra. And I feel like right now that's a little off balance. Not in every release. I'm generalizing, of course, but again, just things I kind of see. The other thing I'll mention, the last thing I'll mention, which is just a pet peeve, one of the things that I don't understand why I even have to talk about it. Why in the hell are record labels still using paper sleeves? It is absolutely freaking ridiculous that any consumer would pay $25, $30, $40, $50 for a record, and you pull it out and you got paper sleeves, which can scuff the records very easily within the jacket before it's even open, just from the record moving around. Certainly when the consumer pulls the record in and out of the paper sleeve, can scuff the paper sleeve. And not to mention that paper filaments sometimes are all over the records and in the grooves. And you know why? You know why? Because they want to save pennies. I'm talking about pennies. I press records with my record label, and I can tell you the difference in cost between a true paper inner sleeve that's all paper and an actual poly-lined inner sleeve, which protects the record. You're talking about fractions of a penny. I feel like I'm talking about Office Space, but really it's a nominal cost, and especially when you're talking about artists who are pressing thousands of records. I only press usually a couple hundred records, and we still upgrade to the polyline sleeve because it's a no-brainer to protect your investment and protect the consumer's investment. But the labels who are pressing tens of thousands of records of these massive artists, a lot of them are still using these paper sleeves that are absolute garbage, and that's just a horrible thing when you're producing something that is a work of art and costs $30, $40, $50, and you still have to deal with something cheap like this because the label wanted to save pennies on the overall job. Pennies. That's a terrible thing that's still going on in the industry right now in 2024. So there you go. There's my list of rights. There's my list of wrongs. I'm sure there's a ton more after that. In fact, I'd love to hear from you. What's going right with the industry? What's going right with your collecting? And what's going wrong in the industry? When you walk into a record store, what do you not like to see? Or when you go shop online, what do you not like to see? I'd love to hear your comments. Love to hear feedback. Appreciate you. As always, this has been another episode of Talking About Records. My name is G.I. Sanders, and we'll see you again next time.